What's up, gangsters? And welcome back to MURDERDRONE. If that doesn't ring a bell, please check out the my first part in this two-part video series. It's pretty good. It's pretty fun, if I'm allowed to say so myself. But basically, short version, we're gonna take a look at a bunch of sleepy, homemade horror movies. And I do mean that in the most flattering way possible. So, let's just pick things up where we left them off last time. But first, huge shout out to the latest Patreon members. Angela Dunn, Joel Denstor, Eduardo Valadez, Lurker, and JCX94. You guys are very cool. So, if some of you out there like what I do over here with horrible reviews and would like to support me in being able to do so more consistently, in exchange for some cool perks like early access to videos, uncensored videos, outtakes, little previews, please take a look over at patreon.com/horriblereviews. But, like I said, let's just pick things up where we left them off, which means it's time to take a look at the next Hazy fever dream horror movie, hopefully, Lunchmeat, which I do not own a physical copy of, as this one is unfortunately stuck in VHS hell, and I wouldn't even know where to begin by looking for a copy. Especially not with Lunchmeat VHS, which admittedly not a bad starting point, mostly pointing you in the direction of the fanzine web shop of that exact name, where they ironically do not sell Lunchmeat on VHS. So let's just take a look at the movie. Yes, Lunchmeat. One word, apparently. And in the famous words of mother pieces, you don't have to go to Texas for a chainsaw massacre, as you can apparently also just stay near Los Angeles for your uninspired exploitation. So, what do we get here? Well, can't go wrong with a group of annoying quote-unquote teenagers.
How the hell am I supposed to make a sandwich without the lunch meat?
Hey, that's from the title.
It's my fault. I was supposed to pick some up on the way over.
Oh, come on, you dildos.
Okay. They're on their way for a trip, but not before making a stop at this burger joint. And they're kinda the worst.
The gas gauge is broken, okay?
Well, fix it. You're the rich kid from Encino, remember?
He is not riding in my Jeep, Eddie.
Oh, really? They're mostly just nagging this whole time.
Eddie, put it in reverse and back it up.
Don't be ridiculous.
I can't even really tell them apart. To be honest, I'm not even sure how many of them there are in total. But then, of course, we also get the bad guys, the hillbillies, if you will. And they do not fare much better on the likability department.
What I got would be just fine, Paul, but he got those rifles like I wanted to.
With your fool brother Benny Action, we be acting all the time, that'd be just fine.
What are they saying? But yeah, as you can probably imagine, considering this is a MURDERDRONE title, the plot is paper thin, and before you know it, the movie is basically just a game of survival with the hillbillies chasing and trying to kill the teenagers. Because, as it turns out, they're cannibals, and I guess they supply meat to that one burger joint, which is something I totally missed. Either it was really unclear, or I just didn't expect this to be a movie where you actually have to pay attention. Anyway, this running through the forest part of the movie is where the meat of the matter is. Pun intended, Alvi. And it's giving MURDERDRONE. It's so deliciously repetitive and mind-numbing. At some point, you're watching one of the bad guys trying to get to this girl that's underneath a car, and it goes on for what feels like an eternity. In general, like, how are they so bad at killing a bunch of unarmed, injured victims? And as straightforward as the story is, I was still so confused as to who is killed off and who is still alive and trying to get away. Dozing off while watching probably didn't help, but that is a testimony to its effectiveness as a MURDERDRONE title. This is like most of the movie. I kinda love it. Sure, it's no Texas Chainsaw Massacre. If anything, it's the somewhere just outside of LA pickaxe inconvenience. But I don't know, it has its charm. As annoying and repetitive as it is, it does contain some of that desirable murder-drone trend state-inducing qualities. And after all, isn't that what we're looking for here? I mean, are we? I guess so. I couldn't really find much information about the filmmakers here. It's director Kirk Alex's only credit, who, according to IMDb Trivia, is a Vietnam War veteran who drove a cab for several years before he could amass enough money to make the movie. That's pretty cool. And I guess he's a writer now? Looks like his work is pretty canon. Anyway, let's rate this movie on its murder drone qualities. Which, again, if that doesn't ring a bell, you didn't listen to me. I explained all of this in the first part. So, well, let's see. Stripped down premise, a solid 7. Droney sins and score, gotta go for a 4, as this was unfortunately kinda lacking here. Trend state sleepiness, 5. It does a fairly decent job. Honestly, not bad. Could be a little better, but what if I told you things are about to be a little better? Because we're heading back to France, apparently they have their murder drone on lock over there, this time with Ogroff, also known as the Mad Mutilator. I don't really have a joke for that, but so let's just take a look at the movie. Yes, and I hope you're ready for endless, mindless wandering around in a forest, because that's Ogroff. Not trying to get ahead of myself here, but this is quintessential murder drone. Like some of the best in the genre, this was shot without sound. It has close to zero dialogue, barely any foley, mostly just a mind-numbing, ever-present droning assault on the auditory senses. Oh my goodness, it's... Don't get me wrong, I'm writing this as a compliment, like one of the major pros of the movie. Like, I can't pick just one example. So, you know what? Here's 5 random parts of the movie. I love it so much. And ironically, I hate how repetitive I myself become in describing these movies when it comes to them possessing this, let's again just call them like trance state inducing qualities, which Ogroff absolutely has down to a T. Co-writer of the Murder-Drone book, Claire, does a fantastic job at describing exactly this in her Letterboxd review for Ogroff. Check it out, I simply just can't write like this, but it does capture more or less exactly how this movie makes you feel. It's so delightfully no budget. Shot on Super 8 but only available as this tape transfer, the whites are blown out, the editing is rough, it's very charming. Oh, so about the story. There's Ogroff, the goofy-looking titular Mad Mutilator, apparently played by the director himself, who kills people. That's it. It is kinda gory and mean-spirited though, as Ogroff doesn't seem to mind casually sawing up some kids. No one is safe in this one. Ogroff even goes to town on a car, Street Fighter style. I've seen this movie twice now, or 3 times, maybe 4. There's literally no way of telling. And to be fair, I do always forget that there is more stuff towards the end. All of a sudden there's zombies, and at the very end even a vampire, somehow played by Jess Franco regular Howard Vernon, because why the f*** not at this point? But all of this might as well just not happen, as it's virtually impossible to still be paying attention this far into the movie. I usually zone out somewhere around the half point. This is pretty rough to get through. You can watch it on double speed and it'll still take forever, and that's with some scenes already being sped up in the movie itself. And I know I keep repeating myself, but again, it is absolutely part of the movie's charm. It's just such a bunch of nothing. It's the ambient slasher, accidental background cinema. And for that, kinda love this movie. The story goes that the director, Norbert Mortier, a low-budget horror movie enthusiast, at the time was running a video rental store and shot Ogroff on the weekends for no money in the hopes of eventually renting it out in his video rental store. And if that's actually true, I love that. He made a few more movies later in his career, although it seems like they mostly remain unseen. But hey, he blessed the world with Ogroff, and I couldn't be more grateful. To the rating board. Stripped down premise? Absolutely, you know they did. 9. Boom. I already forgot about the zombies and vampire again. Drony sins and score? Yes please. 8. Trend state sleepiness? Again, up there at the top. Another 9. Oh yeah. Next up, Satanwar. Like Lunchmeat, one word apparently, Satanwar. But also like Lunchmeat, unfortunately doomed to be stuck on VHS. So again, unfortunately, I don't have a copy. I wouldn't even know where to find one, to be honest. But let that not ruin our fun, and let's just take a look at Satanwar. The oldest movie on the list, written, directed, and produced by TV actor Bart LaRue. Is that French? And presented by Janus Studios, not to be confused with the slightly more prestigious Janus Films, Satanwar is a bit of an outlier, as we're not presented a slasher flick here, but rather a paranormal, supernatural horror movie.
The film that you're about to see is based on real events that have taken place in the world of the supernatural.
Okay, maybe. Maybe not, though. What we get here is an anthology of kinds, bookended by 2 short 15-minute segments, but I'll be focusing on the main attraction here. Despite not being a slasher, it still follows the Murder-Drone formula rather closely, with a stripped-down premise of a couple moving into a new house, where some spooky stuff happens. Mostly crosses turning upside down. A lot of crosses turning upside down. And gooey stuff. Yeah, this movie is mostly crosses turning upside down and gooey stuff. Although, at some point, the woman does get attacked, molested even, by the evil entity. And, oh my, I love this couple. They're so nonchalant about what's happening.
Whatever it is, it's evil.
He evidently likes you. Hey, it might not be too bad to have an extra man around the house.
He wants me. And I'm not going to be molested day and night just so you don't have to take out the garbage.
Just tell him that rape, sex, and molestation is my department.
Did have nice hands. Maybe we shouldn't get rid of him so fast.
What are you talking about? I love the dubbing, by the way. It's so terrible.
What happens next?
I don't know. What is happening?
That's exactly what I'm wondering. So, they ask for help from a friend who is into psychic stuff, who, when she comes over, mostly just tells them what happened in different rooms. And then the entity takes on a physical form, I think? I can barely see anything, it's so dark. And then they leave, and the movie, or well, this segment, just sorta ends. It's great. Fantastic satanic panic nonsense. It's so slow and mundane and sleepy and trance-inducing, mostly caused by the absolute show stealer of the movie, the soundtrack. It's mostly the same theme over and over. It's actually giving me, like, It Follows vibes. I love it. I hate that I'm struggling so much to describe the feeling that this movie creates, as, you know, that's kind of my job here, especially considering the fact that we're covering a bunch of movies handpicked specifically for this unique state that they put you in. But it's like, due to the basically absent premise and sluggish pacing, general nothingness, the lo-fi video quality overrun by droning synths, the movie just transports you into this state of hypnotic sub-wakefulness, which is arguably the ultimate goal of Murder-Drone, so, well, mission accomplished. Really quick though, as it is part of the movie. It opens with a segment dubbed the Black Mass intro that is seemingly missing from most copies floating around the internet, which is a Mundo-type presentation of just that, a Black Mass ceremony. And after the feature presentation, the movie closes with a similar segment, this time focusing on a voodoo worship ritual, which, like the intro, really isn't all that interesting.
The rhythmic beat of the drums transports each participant into a state of trance.
Like this movie does. It does honestly lose a little bit of steam towards the end with the voodoo stuff, but the middle hour of this is fantastic from a Murder-Drone perspective. Although, that's kind of mean to say. I actually just sincerely actually like this movie. Really, I would love to see a proper high-definition transfer for this one. Vinegar Syndrome or any of the 20,000 partner labels, you're hearing this. In the meantime, let's first just take a look at how well this movie fares in our rating system. Stripped down premise, well, despite this not being a slasher to begin with, still gotta rate it a 6, because this is some basic shit. Droney Sins, or score? Well, you heard me praise the score, definitely deserves a 9. Trend State Sleepiness? 7, absolutely gets the job done. And I might be cheating a little bit here because these ratings are based on just the central hour of the movie, but hey, what's gonna stop me? So, only 2 titles left, let's see what we got. First up, it's Scary Movie. Not to be confused with Scary Movie, the spoof I tried to spoof when I was a little kid. Okay, sounds fun. Let's see. It's funny, or at least interesting, how watching this movie reminded me of how relative the definition of a good movie is. I mean, in any other context, this movie would be considered not much more than a regional horror oddity that at best made a small splash in Austin, Texas. But among all these Murder-Drone titles, this is some legit filmmaking. For starters, what other movie on this list can boast that it stars an Academy Award-nominated actor? Not for this particular role, mind you, but yeah, Scary Movie stars a young John Hawkes, who some 20 years later would receive said nomination for his supporting role in The Winter's Bone. But if there was an award for Biggest Goofball, I'm sure he would have been nominated back in '91 as well. See, here he plays the role of Warren, an anxious, cartoony, scaredy-cat nerdy teenager who attends the local and quietest Halloween haunted house. Together with his friend? I'm so confused about their relation, as his bro dude buddy is mostly just kind of a dick towards him. Anyway.
Psycho killer escapes on Halloween night. Yeah, right.
Well, better believe it, bruh. That's literally the premise of the movie. So, the story is pretty easily figured out. Psycho killer hides in the haunted house and kills people, but the audience can tell since it's a spooky attraction, Wizard of Gore style. Speaking of, I really dig the whole boo haunted house aesthetics here. It looks great, lovely Halloween atmosphere. And I kinda dig the overall vibe of the movie. It's simultaneously quirky, odd, and awkward. It's almost as if we experience everything through the neurotic point of view of our main character, which sometimes results in these semi-surreal, fever dreamish sequences. It's good stuff. But then, are you ready for the twist? Spoiler, in case you wanna avoid it. Because how I figured out the story earlier, none of that happens. The killer never even makes it to the haunted house. It's essentially not even a slasher flick. I don't think anyone dies in this movie. Which might seem like a huge cop-out, but it's maybe kind of clever in a dumb way? I don't know. Initially I hated it, but now I don't mind it so much. Mostly because the movie is kind of charming. Perhaps not so much in that typical Murder-Drone way, but more so in a personal comfort movie kind of way. In the same way I love titles like Troll 2, The American Scream, and Vacaciones de Terror. And that's great. It's just, it doesn't feel very Murder-Drone-y, to me at least. I absolutely miss the droning soundtrack. It's maybe too self-aware. It's almost too well made, relatively speaking, as this would still drag a lot for your casual horror movie viewer. I don't know. I don't really have a satisfying conclusion for this one. Apparently, this movie was never officially released until the American Genre Film Archive put it on disc a couple of years ago, and I'm actually glad they did. I mean, it's a fun little treat to pop in during the Halloween season, if you don't mind your horror extremely low budget and not very good. Yeah, let's see how this one does in our rating system. Stripped down premise? I gave it a 4, which seems low, but I did. Droney sins or score? Well, one of these had to get the dreaded 1 score, and I'm afraid it's best applicable here. And Trend State Sleepiness? Another low score, 2. Even when you're dozing off during this, it does feel somewhat differently than how I feel like core Murder-Drone affects you. Does that make sense? It really doesn't matter all that much. What does matter is that we're already at our last Murder-Drone entry. And, well, are we gonna go out with a blast? Well, it's an interesting one, that's for sure. Twisted Issues. And, why is this an interesting one, you might ask? Well, let me tell you. For starters, it's the only Murder-Drone title that's shot on video. But that's really just one of the many things in which this movie stands out. Twisted Issues is a very punk, both figuratively and literally. Shot in Gainesville, Florida, director Charles Pinion's first feature-length movie, above anything, serves as a beautiful little homage, or time capsule, if you will, to the local skate and punk scene of the late 80s. And there might even be a bit of a story going on while we're at it. About this skater who gets arrested by a bunch of older punks who eventually leave him to die, but then he's brought back to life, nails a deck to his foot, and becomes a mass killer out for revenge. And while that might sound like your typical, well, not typical, but while it might sound like a fair basis for a slasher flick, this movie actually kinda goes against the whole Murder-Drone stripped-down slasher premise characteristic, as there's just so much more going on. Or is there? I honestly can't tell. Pinion is in the movie himself, as Charles, who, when he's not fantasizing about killing his girl because she doesn't like sprouts, mostly watches his magical television that shows what's happening elsewhere in the movie. Either that, or a lot of quickly intercut socio-political content that might hold some meaning, or it's all just a little edgy. Did I mention this movie is punk? The whole soundtrack is made up from what seems to be all local punk bands. We even get some glimpses here and there of them actually performing, which is great and absolutely contributes to that, that aforementioned time capsule experience. I mean, as much as I love the droning score in some of the other Murder-Drone titles, as you should know by now, this is something completely different, but I could not imagine this movie without it, as it's just such an integral part of it. Somewhere along the third act, if we pretend for a second that Twisted Issues adheres to the traditional 3-act structure, the movie does kinda lose me. I wouldn't have minded if it was a little shorter, like the director's second 2 movies, Red Spirit Lake and We Await, because, well, this is quite an exhausting watch. Lots of drinking and smoking, it's colorful, flashy, distorted, disorienting. The slasher elements get a little gory here and there with cheap but charming effects. There's dark comedy, there's, oh my goodness, there's just so much going on. honestly, it's kind of hard to do it all justice in just a brief review like this. And while writing this, I almost forgot that it's part of Murder-Drone, because, to me at least, it just really doesn't feel like any of the other movies in this series. But that's not a bad thing. Sure, it's definitely not for everybody, but if this looks like something you get a bit of a kick flip out of, be sure to give it a chance. Or otherwise, either of his 2 second movies. They're all shot on video, but Pinion, he does always bring something unique to the shot on video genre, which makes them, like stand out from the trash often associated with the formats. But yeah, what a movie to end this series with. Again, it might not be the most aligned with the Murder-Drone core principles, but as a do-it-yourself, experimental, punk, art slasher flick, it's a pretty great and unique experience. And a little bird told me that next year it'll get a fancy Blu-ray release, so that's exciting. Although I am already quite happy with my customized copy that I bought straight from the director, Charles Pinion himself. Pretty cool. Anyway, I do first have to still rate this one on its Murder-Drone qualities. Let's see. Stripped down premise. The fact that I wouldn't even really know where to begin by explaining the premise here, I'm afraid this one is getting the dreaded 1. Droney synths and score. While the soundtrack is undeniably remarkable, it's just not very droney, so 2. And then finally, trend state sleepiness, another dreaded 1. This movie really is just such a different kind of beast. And that brings the final scoreboard to this. Ta-da! Again, one more time. It's not that they're ranked on how good, well-made or entertaining they are. It's really just how well they align with how I interpret the micro-genre that is Murder-Drone. Not to be cheesy, but they're all winners in my book. It's just, and I don't think I've ever talked about this here, but I have this condition called restless legs syndrome. You can look it up. It's kind of sucks, and especially it made sitting through these movies quite a struggle every now and then, but so worth it. Yeah. Like I mentioned in the first part, the book Murder-Drone will soon be reissued through Crucial Blast. They don't have an exact date yet, but I'll leave a link in the description. You can sign up for their newsletter, so you'll be, you'll be able to stay up to date on all of that. If what you saw in these 2 videos seemed interesting to you, and you want to read a little bit more about the movies, be sure to support the writers and get yourself a copy as well when it becomes available. I am curious about the future of Murder-Drone. Can and will more movies be added to the list at some point? Titles like Science Grace, Sledgehammer, perhaps even a personal favorite, Things, would not look misplaced among all the ones I've covered in this video. Also, around now-ish, I'm not sure exactly when this video comes out, In a Violent Nature hits theaters in the US, and I keep seeing it being described as an ambient slasher. Could this be the first modern Murder-Drone movie? Well, we'll see. For now, I'll be wrapping up this second part in this 2-part video series. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun making this one. I'm quite excited with how they both turned out. So feel free to let me know in the comments below. Follow me on Instagram at horrible.reviews if you aren't already. And I'll try to post a little more often there. And while you're at it, also follow me on Letterboxd, just like at Horrible Reviews. And then I'll try and post a little more often there as well. Cheers, guys. Have a nice day.